In this video, you're going to see how the Queen Bee can help you finish your audio effects designs quicker, and how it can help you complete projects you may never finish otherwise. I'm also going to show you the benefits of building effects in stages and how to use the Queen Bee to troubleshoot your designs. One of the huge benefits of the HiveR Queen Bee is just connectivity. Having a simple way to connect everything together in something that doesn't make your desk space look like a tornado just went through it. We have 1/4-inch jacks to connect your input and your output. These could go, from your guitar to your amplifier. That's the way I have it hooked up right now. Or this could go into your pedal chain, at the spot that you want to develop this new effect that you're working on. The Queen Bee also has a loop for signal. You could connect that to a signal generator. This would be especially helpful whenever setting up equalization. On the other side of the board, we have an audio test loop, and this is really good for troubleshooting audio circuits if things just aren't working quite the way you think they should. Another feature of the Queen Bee is these bypass capacitors. Nobody wants to accidentally send DC voltage to their amp. So these are a couple of sockets where you can choose the type and the size of the capacitor that you would like to have. We also have 2 switches down here. These allow you to either enable the bypass capacitors or to disable those capacitors. A very handy feature of the Queen Bee is the volume knob. There's a lot of times that we're working with an op amp or working with a transistor, and all of a sudden things get super loud and we didn't necessarily expect it at that moment. So being able to turn that down is just within reach at all times. It's important to note that the audio path is completely separate from the power pathway. So the audio will actually work even if there's no power plugged into this board at all. The headers on the Queen Bee are almost identical. These 3 headers here are exactly identical. This one over here shares all of the connections. The only difference is that the receive and the send are in different spots. That would be in case you wanted to plug this side into another adapter board or another Queen Bee or whatever. The general flow of audio in the Queen Bee is to come in the input, go through the bypass capacitor, go to these effects stages where it goes in and out, or if bypass is hit, then that can get a little bit different. And then it comes over towards the end here and goes out to an extension board and back in. When it comes back in, then it would go to the volume, the bypass capacitor, and then out the output cable. Each one of the effects stages is pretty much identical. At the beginning, there's an impedance adjustment area. This is a 1 mega ohm potentiometer, so you can use this to move from 0 to 1 mega ohms of resistance. And then we have a switch down here. If it's in the 0 position, then we're going from 0 to 1 mega ohm. If we switch it to 1 mega ohm, that engages this 1 mega ohm resistor here. And these are in series. So then we would go 1 mega ohm to 2 mega ohms. The impedance section can be switched off or switched on. If it's switched off, then this section right here is having nothing to do with your circuit whatsoever. If you do have impedance turned on, then we have these 2 test pads here so that whenever you get your circuit designed, you can measure the amount of impedance that you added in this stage so that you can add that to your final circuit. Another part of each audio stage is the bypass effect button. If the bypass effect button is engaged, then the audio will come in but skip any of the effects that are plugged into the effects stage. So it'll just basically bypass that stage. If it is disengaged, then the audio will go out to the effects stage and then come back in and go to the next section. Another button that's present at every effects stage is the post effects return button. What this does basically is send the audio straight back into the output stage of the Queen Bee. So it bypasses any effects stages after this one. So if you just want to hear this one stage and what's going on there, then you depress this button so that this effect is engaged, and then you press in the button so that it bypasses any other stages, and that allows you to solo one effect that's plugged into the board. This diagram shows the impedance section of the Queen Bee. Here's effects stage 1. We show a resistor going to ground, and basically that's the circuit that we have right here. We have a potentiometer and a resistor that's selectable, but both of those added together give you the resistance that's going to the ground as shown in this diagram. And then this section right here is the next stage and the amount of resistance going to ground on that stage. Okay, so right now I have the Queen Bee hooked up to a signal generator. We're setting at 460 Hertz, and I just want to show kind of how the bypass and the post effects return works on the Queen Bee. Okay, right now the signal generator is on and we're not hearing anything. That's because none of the buttons are engaged on the Queen Bee. Now, if we were to engage this bypass button, we still don't hear anything, but we are bypassing the effects stage here. In order to hear the signal, we're going to have to send it back to the output using the post effects return. The same thing, if we're sending it straight back to the output, but we don't have the bypass engaged, then it's trying to send the signal out to an external board, but there's nothing there, and so we're not hearing anything. So in order to just use this stage with nothing attached and hear the signal, we have both of them pressed down. Now, if we just want to bypass this and send to the next stage, we depress that button. Now it's being sent to the next stage, but we're not hearing anything still because we don't have a board attached, and with this depressed we would have to have a board attached, and we also don't have a return. So I'm going to set the return and bypass the board. Now we have our signal generator coming through. This little exercise has just been about how this works. We're going to move on, and I'm going to plug in some circuits and we'll see some more practical reasons of why it's made this way. Okay, when I was setting this up, I came up with the perfect scenario where this is really helpful. I plugged these in and I just wasn't getting any sound at all. I'm like, well, what's going on here? And so anyway, I have the post effects return turned on for the second stage because I wanted to go through everything. And so in order to kind of test this out and see what's going on, I engage the bypass and I see, okay, well, this board right here is where the problem is. I engage this one, I'm not hearing any improvement whatsoever. But bypassing this board, I can tell that this one is getting a signal. So now I know where to look, and breadboards can be kind of bad about losing connections or something, especially on potentiometers like this one right here. So that's about how long it took me to figure out where the problem was, and that's just because of these switches and the fact that I built this effect in stages. Now it's pretty hard to talk with the amplifier so loud. I'm just going to turn down a little bit. Hopefully you can still hear what's going on. So anyway, with what's going on right now, I can bypass this one. I can bypass that one. I can hear the combined effects of both boards. Or if I'm having trouble, I can just bypass everything and hear the dry signal and hear what's going on there. Another scenario that happens way too often is whenever you just don't hear any sound, you don't know what you've done wrong. I've made up this scenario, but it's been fairly common for me. Another one of the features on the Queen Bee is that we have this output test loop for the audio. And with the output test loop, you can, use a probe and try to figure out what's going on. There, I hear that the signal is coming in. I'm getting signal to the base of my transistor there. My transistor is amplifying the signal, so I'm also getting a signal at the collector, and I can follow my collector back. I'm getting signal across this capacitor, and then I notice, wow, I plugged the wire into the wrong row on the breadboard. And so I'm hearing some kind of signal. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can go on further and I can probe. I can see we're getting signal all the way through the breadboard. This right here, I hadn't mentioned it before, but that's a place where the output of this effects stage is. You could use that if, let's say that you were wanting to take part of the signal and send it to another stage later on down the chain. Like for instance, if you were going to blend in a dry signal with a reverb or something like that, a couple of effects down, you could pull your signal out of here, use a jumper, take it a couple of effects down, and insert it back in. So anyway, that's what that test loop is for. But I can also test my signal, and I can see that I've got signal there. If I look over here, I know that's my input, so it is going into this effect. So something's wrong in this effect. And what I did was pull the jumper off, and I'm not giving any power. In this totally made up scenario, I'm hoping that you see some things that have actually happened to you whenever you're trying to build your circuits. I know these things have happened to me for sure, but these are the types of situations where the troubleshooting tools really come in handy on the Queen Bee. As recapping over the troubleshooting tools, I was able to bypass stages to try to figure out which stage was causing me issues. I was also able to hook up a test probe so that I could probe the different parts of the circuit and try to figure out where the issues were coming from. And it seems like there should be more to it than that, but any good system is just a simple system. The Swarmer adds 8 effects stages to the HiveR Queen Bee, so all of the power is replicated all along all of the effects stages, and the input output is woven in and out of each effects stage. All of the effects stages on the Swarmer are identical to the effects stages on the Queen Bee. So you have your impedance area, you have your off-on switch, you can add your 1 mega ohm resistor, you've got your 1 mega ohm potentiometer on here, so for a total of 2 mega ohms possible of impedance. You've got your test pads, just like what we had on the Queen Bee. You have your bypass effect and your post effects return, just like we did on the Queen Bee. You have your audio test loop. This is the output of the effects stage, just like we did on the Queen Bee. So we have these numbered. We have effects stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it goes around in that direction. At the very end over here, not sure if it's going to show up in the video. Maybe I can slide this over. At the very end over here, we have a switch that lets us decide if we're going to run through this swarmer and then go back to the queen bee, or if we're going to exit the swarmer out the extension and go through another extension board and then back in. So with this setup right here, we effectively have 10 effect stages that we can use, and we can do all kinds of stuff with 10 effect stages. So one of the things I talked about at the very beginning of the video is why would you build your effects in stages? And the reason I believe it's advantageous to build your effects in stages is because, for one, it allows troubleshooting like we saw earlier whenever we were having problems. If you're having problems with a big complex circuit and it's just not working, then it's fairly difficult to go through and test everything and figure out where your problem is. And whenever you have a big circuit on breadboard, then that's a whole lot of potential connections that, may be just kind of jacked up because it's a bad connecting wire, or because your breadboard contacts are getting a little bit weak. Breadboards are pretty notorious for losing connectivity, and whenever you have hundreds of connections on a breadboard, that's just a lot to look through. And by being able to isolate your total effect into different stages, you can narrow down really quickly where the problem is, what circuit's giving you issues. Another reason that building effects in stages is good is because sometimes you build a section of an effect that you just really like you like the sound of that, and in that case you could do like I've done here. This is an Electra circuit with some added diodes here, but I've just committed this to a soldered breadboard, and I can reuse this section of the circuit over and over again, and I don't have to redesign it. I don't have to reconnect it. I don't have to go through my parts bin looking for parts. Like, this is just something I can pick up and reuse. Another reason for building effects in stages, I will be offering at some point soon, hopefully, some pre-designed circuits, especially if things that sometimes people have problems with. People have problems with for instance, the PT2399. I've seen several people post in guitar pedal building forums on Facebook about how they just can't get their design working. They're wondering if they got a counterfeit chip or something like that. And if I can design a circuit and they get it and they plug it into their HiveR system and it works, then that gives them a reference circuit to be able to check against their own designs, or it gives them a working design that they can pop their chip into and check their chip and see if it really is counterfeit. Those are all good reasons to build your circuits in stages. Something else I want to touch on, though, is some other reasons why you might want to own the HiveR Queen Bee, or even the HiveR Queen Bee with the swarmer. One of those reasons might be because you're someone who has to pack up everything and put it away and then get it back out every time you work on your guitar pedals. This system right here is really compact, really easy to manage. We've got an AC adapter for power here. That's really easy compared to using a dedicated power supply. We've got input and output jacks. You just plug it in. You don't have jacks with wires coming off the ends of them and trying to reconnect where you had it on the circuit board last time. And the same thing, since we're talking about that, we have these connections here. If you're working on a breadboard, then it's really easy to make sure, like right now, I've got these wires hooked into these places. I've got this capacitor hooked in there. If I decide that I'm done for the day with this circuit, but I want to change over to a different circuit, well, I can easily just change over to a different circuit that I was working on previously, and just plug that into my HiveR system. Now I've changed from one circuit to another one, and it just took moments. And finally, another great reason to have the Queen Bee is that you can use it to test your own pedal designs after you get them populated. Say you make your own design, you send it in, you have it manufactured, you populate it with the header system that we're using for the HiveR board here, you plug it in. That's a really, really simple way to get connectivity to your power and your in and your out so that you can test your circuit and see if it works before you put too much more into it. The audio path for the Queen Bee is designed to give you maximum flexibility while maintaining excellent audio quality. It is designed to achieve awesome results in a way that is logical and simple to operate. With the built-in troubleshooting features and the advanced design, you're set up for audio effects success.